Your next witness.
I would,
We would like to call to the stand Mrs. Harry S. Truman, First Lady.
Mrs. Harry S. Truman, the wife of the President.
hello.
Your witness.
Please introduce yourself and tell us why you're here today.
I'm Elizabeth Truman, President Truman's wife, and I'm here to support my husband in his time of need and help prove his innocence.
Did your husband, President Truman, show any concerns during the decision-making process of whether the U.S. would decide to drop the bomb or not?
Yes, of course. I remember waking up at night and seeing my husband sitting in the side of the room, reading in low light and thinking about this very strenuous decision. And yeah,
President Truman did not know about the Manhattan Project. Is that right?
Yeah, he didn't know. It came very sudden.
How do you characterize your husband after the death of President Roosevelt?
All this responsibility came to him very suddenly, and he had a lot of weight on his shoulders and a lot of decisions to make. And he was very stressed, and he didn't sleep for nights and nights thinking about what to do next.
Do you think what your husband did was morally correct?
Given this, in order to save millions of lives, he took away 200,000. And this, as heinous as this act may have been teleologically, I believe it's absolutely morally correct.
I have one final question. Do you only support your husband's decisions because he is in fact your husband?
No, we have disagreed about many things a lot of times, but in this particular decision, he reflects my own opinions.
Thank you.
Your witness, please.
Hello, Mrs. Truman.
Oh.
I'm sure you love your husband very much, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And do you trust him
of course.
enough to put a country's life in his hands?
Yes,
Enough to put your life in his hands?
of course.
Do you believe he made the correct decision
Absolutely.
based on moral grounds, not
Yes, as I said before, I completely morally agree with him.
the right decision for the country or for him to portray a different image about himself?
He's the president. That's his job, to protect American lives, to save them.
But by protecting, although he protected these American lives, wasn't he creating some sort of an image for himself too?
I don't think he did anything to make an image for himself.
As First Lady, would you try to help these people recover of Japan? You know, maybe send food, help them in order to boost your image.
Not to boost my image, but maybe, like, morally I would.
So there's a possibility you might help them try to recover from this devastating event that has occurred.
Yeah, as I would help anyone.
Would you drop the bomb, Mrs. Yeah.
We didn't see the Japanese doing anything after Pearl Harbor. So.
Objection overruled. But get to your next question. You have time for one more.
Would you drop the bomb, Mrs. Truman?
Yes, I would.
Okay, so even though you would help them, you would still drop the bomb and try to kill them all over again.
I didn't say that I'd particularly help them. I said that generally people in need, I'd help them.
You said you'd help them just like you'd help anybody.
Yeah, but it was to protect the America. I would have
Yeah,
done it.
but still, you
Thank
said...
you. That's your final question. You may be seated. Your next witness.
We would like to call to the stand Carl Compton, atomic scientist.
Carl Compton.
Well, who are you and why can you be considered an expert witness?
My name is Carl Compton and I'm a very successful scientist since I was honored with many medals and served greatly in my community. I consider myself as being the most expert and at the same time objective witness because although I had no responsibility for any of the decisions, I had the unusual opportunity to know pertinent facts from several angles. I was a member of a group called by the Secretary of War to test the use. I then became attached to General MacArthur in Manila and knew about the invasion plans. Finally, I spent the first month after VJ in Japan.
Was the Japanese army defeated when the bombs were dropped?
The answer is no, in the sense that it was still fighting desperately, and there was every reason to believe that it would continue to do so, and this is the only answer that has any practical significance. Also, in order to evaluate my answer, one has to understand the Japanese mentality. The Japanese had the famous slogan, "Death before surrender." The government forced civilians into suicide, and let's not forget about the kamikaze air pilots.
Can you compare the number of casualties between the atomic bomb and conventional bomb raids dropped during the war?
First of all, war is inhumane. These are the facts. At Hiroshima, the atomic bomb killed about 80,000 people, and at Nagasaki, the fatal casualties were 45,000. Compare this with the results of B-29 incendiary raids over Tokyo. One of these raids killed about 125,000 people.
Well, since the conventional bomb was even more effective, why don't you continue with these bombs?
The atomic bomb introduced a dramatic new element into the situation. When the second atomic bomb was dropped, it became clear that this was not an isolated weapon, but there were others to follow.
Did the atomic bomb bring about the end to the war?
These are the facts. On July 26, 1945, the Potsdam Ultimatum called on Japan to surrender unconditionally. On July 29, Premier Suzuki issued a statement scorning as unworthy of official notice the surrender ultimatum and emphasizing the increasing rate of Japanese aircraft production. 8 days later, on August 6, the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. The second was dropped on August 9 on Nagasaki. August 10, Japan declared its intention to surrender, and on August 14, accepted the Potsdam terms. On the basis of these facts, I cannot believe that without the atomic bomb, the surrender would have come without a great deal more of costly struggle and bloodshed.
And what message does the atomic bomb carry?
The message is that we must strive generously and with all our ability to promote the United Nations effort to assure future peace between nations, but we must not lightly surrender as a means of our own defense. We should surrender or share it when there is adopted an international plan to enforce peace in which we can have great confidence.
Thank you, that'll be all.
Hello, Mr. Compton.
Hello.
Can I have evidence 1? Can you read this for me? You can.
And it was not one atomic bomb or two which brought surrender. It was the experience of what the atomic bomb will actually do to a community, plus the dread of many more that was effective.
So, Mr. Compton, you support the idea that it was not actually the bomb that was dropped that brought the surrender, but just the idea of it being used. Is that correct?
Exactly, because the atomic bomb was an improvement of technology. It was something new, it was a surprise, and it was unexpected. So that's why this happened, because as I said before, the convention...
Okay. So, you just support the idea, not the dropping of the bomb.
No,
just the
I also
idea that would bring surrender.
I support the idea.
It's a yes or no question.
Okay,
answer.
yes.
Okay. So, also, do you know the situation of war production of Japan?
Do I know what?
The war production of Japan. Do you know the situation?
Well, I know that there was an increasing in the Japanese aircrafts, but I don't know about the army.
Okay. So, in your article that you wrote, of if the atomic bomb had not been used,
Exactly.
you said that Japan could not match America in war production. And you had this information from Mr. MacArthur. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you just lied in the court. No further question.
I'm just what?
No, you just lied in the court.
Allow her to explain.
Because you said that.
On what grounds you're calling this witness a liar?
Okay, because he said that he just knew that Japan was improving in aircrafts. Okay, and here I have evidence that he wrote that Japan could not match America in war production.
Can you read me this evidence?
Yeah, it's your article that you wrote.
Where is it? This one?
Yeah.
May I ask when this article was written?
Mr. Nielsen?
Yes, you're going to find out. Give me the front of them.
The highlighted part.
Okay, also in my article, I state that the Japanese aircraft...
I just asked you, I didn't...
Well, I did say that, but that doesn't make me a liar, because in my
No
article...
further question. This was my
Okay,
question.
we will present this to the jury. This is admissible. It was printed by Carl Compton in December of 1946. And the article does refer... I will give it to the jury to review. Thank you. You may be seated. We have 2 witnesses remaining. Will you please call your next witness?
We would like to call to the stand Nanking citizen.
The Nanking citizen, to the stand, please.
All right. Who are you and where are you from? Who are you and where are you from?
I am Jun Chai and I'm a Nanjing survivor. I'm here to uncover the Japanese truths. December 13th, 1937, a day which I thought was like any other, turned out to be the death date of my entire family. I was left alone. On this day, I was preparing my family's meal when suddenly the door slammed open, throwing me straight to the floor. I was startled at first, but fear quickly snapped me back to reality. My eyes immediately spotted the huge butcher knives in the Japanese's hands. Chills rushed through my body as if I was dead, but unfortunately I hadn't even seen the beginning of it. The worst was still yet to come. With every step they took towards me, I could tell in their eyes that they would have no mercy on me. Taking my chances, however, I tried to escape, but that simply got me 5 deep stabbings in my side, back, and upper leg. These scars are a constant reminder of the torture and agony the Japanese were capable of and put us through. Because of my young age, I was not able to foresee this sort of event, even in my wildest nightmares.
Can you describe the extent of brutality the Japanese exposed on you and your family?
The extent of brutality is unimaginable. No person should ever have to see what I saw. I woke up on the kitchen floor from hearing horrid screams coming from the other room. I pulled myself together and used all the remainder strength I had to move myself to the other room. Looking ahead, I saw my mother lying on her stomach, screaming and fighting against the Japanese for her life. At the same time, she was drowning in her own blood, and my sisters. I can still hear my mother's scream from when the Japanese shot them both 3 times in the head. They were most motionless. Their fight was over. They escaped the torture. Knowing this, however, I still could not keep it together. I began bawling on the floor, wanting to escape as well. My mother had taught me better than just to give up. I'm a fighter. Not only, I'm a survivor. I heard a familiar voice pleading for mercy coming from outside, so I proceeded in that direction, only to find my father's head roll off his body. At the exact same moment I looked out the window. Everyone was dead.
Do you believe that the Japanese actions were justifiable in any way?
No. What they did was cruel and heartless. This is not something that can just be pushed away to the back of our minds. 250,000 Chinese died in that one single day. Thousands of victims were beheaded, burned, buried alive, and disemboweled. See, my parents raised me to point out the good qualities in people, but the Japanese don't have any of those. What I'm trying to say is that the Japanese cannot be let off the hook for such an invasion. They cannot be trusted. They're ruthless. I saw my family die right before my eyes. I heard their unbearable screams. I lived with the emptiness inside. I survived, but I will not let this go unheard of.
Sir, one more question, please. Put the last question.
Is there anything else you would like to add to your story?
Yes, after I witnessed my father's death, I ran to hide, a game which thankfully my mother and I would always play. We would spend hours playing together, so I ran and hid under the kitchen table, not making a sound or even moving a muscle. A few days later, my neighbor found me and told me I was one of the lucky few from the tens of millions that had survived. He told me that we needed to get out of there immediately, so he took me to this place called the safety zone, where the Japanese had agreed not to step foot on that land. So in other words, I was safe. Safe from them, but not from the memories that have forever haunted me.
Thank you. That'll be all.
Thank you. Your witness.
Were you hurt in the massacre?
Emotionally and physically, yes.
Okay. Has this event scarred your memory?
Yes.
Are you still scared of Japan?
Not scared.
Yes or no?
No.
You're not scared of them, yet
No.
they attacked you and killed your father.
No.
Okay. Are you scared of bombs?
Yes.
Yet you're on the side of the Americans, the ones who dropped the bomb, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Are you on the side of the U.S. because you truly believe that they made the correct decision in dropping the bomb, or because you want to stay on their good side and out of trouble?
Because I want to show that what the Japanese did cannot go left unheard of.
Okay. Since they made the right decision, why not fight your own battles instead of letting the Americans do it? Maybe because they
Objection.
have... Yeah?
This is argumentative.
Yeah, I'm going to sustain that objection. This witness is not on trial. Keep it to what she is on testimony for.
That's what I'm trying to do.
I don't believe that question was. Go to your next question.
Okay. Do you think the Americans have the power and strength? They are motivational, and all they talk about ending the war sounds good.
Ending the war would sound good, yes.
Okay. Or maybe because you're scared.
I'm not scared.
Okay. Are you maybe scared that your land could be the next invasion, and by supporting them in your decision, you think you've become invisible to them?
No, I'm trying to show that the Japanese cannot go, they can't get let off the hook for this.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have.
Oh.
You may be seated. Thank you. Your last witness, please.
President Harry S. Truman.
The defendant, Mr. President Harry S. Truman, to the stand.
Please rise for the president.
Order in the court. Order in the court, please. Remind the visitors that these questions are pre-prepared. However, the cross-examination is not. Please listen carefully to the last witness.
Mr. President, would you like to formally introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
Thank you, Mr. Economopoulos. My full name is Harry S. Truman. I am the 33rd President of the United States, and I assumed presidency on April 12, 1945, after the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Mr. President, when were you aware of the Japanese threat?
I was first aware of the Japanese threat after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Of course, I knew that Japan was a malignant nation in the Pacific long before that, but Pearl Harbor was what really drove the idea home. More importantly, the attack showed me that the Japanese issue was no longer a foreign affair, but a domestic threat.
And what was it about the Japanese war tactics that worried you the most?
There were two things about the Japanese war tactics that scared me: kamikaze missions and propaganda. Both of these tactics brought death and were symbols of total war, complete mobilization of a nation to fight. The propaganda brought about mass suicides, presenting the invading American army as monsters. This scared locals and showed Americans worse than death, since many preferred to jump off a cliff than to fall into the army's hands.
And what did the mass suicides and kamikaze missions make you realize?
As I said before, the kamikaze missions and the mass suicides showed me how powerful Japanese propaganda was and to what an extent the country was mobilized. People were willing to go on suicide missions to protect Emperor Hirohito, and they were willing to jump off a cliff with their children rather than try to communicate with the US soldiers, which they viewed as bloodthirsty beasts because of the misinformation.
Mr. President, there are people in the audience who are not paying attention. If you so choose to leave the courtroom, I would appreciate that rather than your talking. Thank you.
Furthermore, the mass suicides and the kamikaze missions let me know that surrender was not an option. The people were intellectually captured by the emperor and would fight at all costs. It made me realize that this war would have to end differently. Most importantly, it made me realize that this war was truly total war.
And, Mr. President, what did you know about the Japanese right before utilizing the bomb?
Before utilizing the bomb, I knew that the Japanese had a strict honor code rising from the time of the samurai. This code condemned surrender and put death much more honorable than giving up. I also knew that besides hard to beat, the Japanese were also extremely savage and brutal warriors. I knew this from the kamikaze missions as well as from its expansionary imperialistic past, where Japanese soldiers raped and murdered entire villages to satisfy the will of the emperor.
So how do you justify the dropping of the bombs?
We were desperate to end an already bloody war that had cost nearly 1 million American dead and wounded. We wanted to end the killing, and we did.
So is it true that your intent was to drop the bomb solely on military targets?
Yes, that is precisely what the Secretary of War, Mr. Stimson, and I wish to do. In one of my diary entries, which is picture number 3, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, there? No, real. There? I clearly state that I told the Secretary of War, Mr. Stimson, to use the bomb so that military objectives are the target and not women and children. Furthermore, I would like to state that the targets had to be of great economical and industrial value to the well-being of Japan. Both Hiroshima and Nagasaki had ports that housed the large majority of the remainders of the Japanese fleet. Also, both cities carried heavy industry, which could supply Japanese civilians and soldiers with weapons, ammunition, and vehicles meant for war.
What was the Potsdam Proclamation?
The Potsdam Proclamation was a document composed on July 26, 1945 by the United Kingdom Prime Minister Winston Churchill, the President of the Republic of China, Chiang Kai-shek, which is not here today, and myself. It outlined the terms of surrender for Japan. It stated that if Japan failed to meet this agreement, she could expect, quote-unquote, prompt and utter destruction. Therefore, the Potsdam Proclamation was also the first official warning issued to Japan.
And why was it important that you and the other Allied leaders demand unconditional surrender?
Unconditional surrender was of paramount importance. Japan could not be allowed to remilitarize. The entire country had to be disarmed in order to end imperialism in Southeast Asia, China, and all other countries that suffered underneath Japanese expansionary pressure. The emperor is a symbol of imperialism, and the army revolves around him. Therefore, nothing short of unconditional surrender would suffice to make this war worthwhile.
And what other warnings were issued?
Nearly 5 million leaflets were dropped on Japanese cities, and that is a document which I would like to give to the jury. It is a translated copy of one of the leaflets dropped onto various Japanese cities.
This is hard evidence, so they can have it at their disposal indefinitely.
Yes, indefinitely. As I stated before, nearly 5 million leaflets were dropped on Japanese cities shortly before the bombings. They warned the people of the destruction coming and asked them to evacuate their cities. Furthermore, the Cairo Proclamation could be considered a warning since it mentions relentless military pressure until Japan surrendered.
And what did you know about the bomb before utilizing it?
From the New Mexico test, I knew that 13 pounds of explosive caused the complete disintegration of a steel tower 60 feet high, created a crater 6 feet deep and 1,200 feet in diameter, knocked over a steel tower half a mile away, and knocked men down more than 10,000 yards away. The explosion was visible for more than 200 miles and audible for more than 40 miles or more. I was also informed that there was some radioactive material found in varying intensities, mostly low. However, right before utilizing the bomb, I knew that measured from the point directly below the explosion, the blast should be lethal to at least 1,000 feet. Between 2,500 and 3,500 feet, blast effects should be extremely serious, and heat and flame should be lethal to about 1,500 to 2,000 feet. I also knew that anyone who looked into the explosion from half a mile away would become blind, completely blind, from 1 mile away temporarily blind, and up to and beyond 10 miles temporarily slightly impaired. Most importantly, I knew that there would be no damaging effects from radiation at ground level. The radiation observed in New Mexico desert was due to the low altitude of detonation.
So, Mr. President, how and why did you choose the targets?
The targets were chosen taking certain factors into consideration. Firstly, the target had to be within the flying range of a bomber carrying the heavy load. Secondly, they had to be large industrial targets with a diameter greater than 3 miles. Thirdly, they had to be capable of being damaged effectively by a blast. Lastly, the targets had to be ones that would be unlikely to be attacked again in a 1-year time span. The utilization of the bomb would also have to have a great psychological impact on Japan, so this too was considered. Hiroshima was an important army depot and port of embarkation in the middle of an industrial area. It was a good flying target within flying range, and the adjacent hills were likely to produce a focusing effect, making the blast more effective. Nagasaki was also an important military and industrial target. It also lied in between a series of valleys, an asset which also provided a focusing effect.
So, what other alternatives did you have other than using the bomb?
The other main alternatives were A, a solo U.S. invasion of Japan using naval landings on the southern tip. B, a combined U.S. and Soviet invasion. C, repeated conventional bombing of Japanese cities. D, total blockade and siege. And E, an exhibition of atomic bombing in a vacant area.
So why wouldn't you prefer these?
I didn't prefer a solo U.S. invasion since it would have cost thousands upon thousands, dare I say millions, of American lives and many more Japanese lives than the atomic bomb. I didn't prefer a combined invasion because inevitably Japan would be split between the Allies after the war, much like Germany had. I also didn't want any Soviet influence after World War II. Again, this invasion would cost more American and Japanese lives. A conventional bombing wouldn't have any effect since the Japanese are proud people and would not and do not easily give up. The total blockade was my last option since it would have been extremely cruel to all of Japan. Many people would die and the leaders would not surrender unless the whole nation was dying out. Lastly, I didn't prefer the exhibition of atomic bombing because I couldn't risk one of the bombs not detonating properly. The exhibition bombing may have not been enough to bring about surrender. If then the other one didn't detonate, we would be left without any nuclear weapons, and an incredible amount of money would go to waste. Waiting for the Japanese to surrender was not a cost-free option.
So, do you think it was justified to kill so many civilians for the surrender of military leaders?
As I stated in the message to Richard Russell, I state that I resent the fact that so many people had to die for the pig-headedness of military leaders. However, it was a price worth paying since a full-scale invasion would have cost more Japanese lives, as would repeated conventional air raids. Furthermore, it was one of the few actions that could break the Japanese honor code. I would also like to mention that there was a fine line between the Japanese soldier and the Japanese citizen. At any given point, any civilian could be chosen for a kamikaze mission. Therefore, all civilians could be a potential threat. Furthermore, the citizens of Japanese cities were ready to fight to the death if needed.
Now, Mr. President, is there anything else you'd like to add to brush off these outrageous claims that have been placed against you today?
I would like to add that the Secretary of War, Henry L. Stimson, when making the decision for the bombs, he struck Kyoto, which was the former capital of Japan, from the list because of its cultural significance to the world over the objections of others. And Japanese government had promulgated a national mobilization law, which had been mentioned in the past cross-examinations, called the, how did you name it? The Katsugo, yes, Katsugo. The Katsugo policy, and waged total war, ordering many civilians, including women and children, to work in factories and military offices and to fight against any invading force. In continuation, the whole world was waiting. The whole world was expecting a bloodbath with an invasion. It was estimated that approximately 250,000 to 1 million Americans would have been lost. And nearly 500,000 Purple Heart medals were manufactured in anticipation for a full invasion, and they are still being used today.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Oh wait, there's one more thing I want to mention. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, as you can see, the point of the matter is that the end justifies the means. And despite these events being fresh in our memory, being only 5 years in the past, I think we can all agree on the fact that our world would have changed, that our world we live in today would be overwhelmingly different had it not been for some decisions taken. And I, for one, I'm completely positive that it would have been for the worse. Thank you.
Cross-examination, your witness. You have 7 minutes. You have 7 minutes maximum.
Mr. President, what the Japanese wanted was to surrender by keeping their emperor, but you demanded from them an unconditional surrender, and you said this was one of the reasons for dropping the bomb, correct?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Since the end, you accepted the surrender by keeping the position of the emperor, which if you had done in June 1945, the Japanese would have surrendered much earlier. Why did you use the bomb?
As I had mentioned before, unconditional surrender was vital in order for Japan to not remilitarize and monopolize the Pacific
Okay,
again.
I just asked you why you used the bomb. I don't need a whole
The bomb was
explanation.
used, as I mentioned, the bomb was used to end the war.
Okay.
We had lost.
Okay, thank you. Did you accept the surrender because you were afraid that the Russians would be the power that would end the war, or because you just wanted to show the strength of the bombs? Because your main point, you wanted to checkmate
Allow
the...
him to answer that question, please.
No, I didn't want Soviet influence because, as we had seen, communism was a threat to the U.S. and it had begun expanding in Europe, mainly the Balkans. And I could not afford that to happen in the Pacific, which was a vital asset to the well-being of the U.S.
Okay.
Okay, so in 1946, the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey said that certainly prior to December 31st of 1945 and November 1st, 1945, Japan would have surrendered even if the atomic bombs had not been dropped and even if Russia had not...
Then why didn't it surrender after the bombs were dropped?
Let me finish. And even if Russia had not entered the war, and even if no invasion had been planned or contemplated. This is what the U.S. Strategic Survey said. How do you respond to that?
We would like to see the source.
Yeah,
No,
sure.
it's been presented many times in today's court, so please answer the question.
Can you repeat the question, please?
How do you respond to the U.S. Strategic Survey?
For stating that...
Strategic bombing survey.
Which
states?
Yeah.
That states, repeat one more time.
That states that Japan would have surrendered even if the atomic bomb had not been used, even if Russia had not entered the war, and even if no invasion had been planned.
I think it is clear that the Japanese were not willing to surrender. They didn't surrender after Hiroshima. We dropped 5 million leaflets informing their government. The Potsdam Declaration informed their government, and even though we were completely ignored.
Okay.
May I ask a question? In 1939, there were no immediate threats to the U.S., correct?
There was what?
In 1939, there were no immediate threats to the U.S., correct?
I guess you could say that.
Okay,
So.
then may I ask a question? You had close connections to former President FDR, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so in 1939, he sent a letter, Albert Einstein sent a letter to President Franklin Delano Roosevelt talking about the creation of the bomb. Why would you start creating a bomb when there was no threat?
Well, first of all, this letter was not sent to me, but to Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Yes, but you said you had close connections, so he probably would have told you, correct?
At the time, as you remember, I wasn't informed on the Manhattan Project. I was completely unaware of the construction of an atomic bomb.
Your next question.
Okay. Can we have evidence for? Okay. So, Mr. President, this is a proposed program for Japan. It's a memorandum for you from the Secretary of War on July 2nd. And there's stated that her navy is nearly destroyed, Japan's navy is nearly destroyed, and they don't have enough food supplies for her population. Also, they're terribly vulnerable to our concentrated attack on her crowded cities, industrial and food resources, and we have inexhaustibly and untouched industrial resources. So, doesn't this prove that the use of the atomic bomb was unnecessary?
It was necessary. As I had stated before,
It's a yes or no question.
It was necessary.
It was passed to you, this memorandum.
The answer is yes, it was necessary.
Yes, it was necessary.
Okay.
Can I be allowed to explain?
Yes.
It was necessary. As I had stated before. Wait, can you please restate your question?
Sure. Okay, so in this memorandum, there is
yes, that that they didn't have enough food to survive and all that.
No, but also their navy was nearly destroyed.
Yes, but don't forget that the Kutsogu policy would have implemented all civilians to fight if needed. So when you have such a policy that doesn't distinct between civilians and soldiers, why not use it to end the war?
Next question, you have 2 minutes.
However, you're here to be charged with the killings you ordered, not the ones you claim to have prevented. So you say. So even if we are to believe that the bomb would kill hundreds of thousands, even millions of lives, we are still far from legal ground, you know. And the laws of war are not suspended during final battles. And anyway, you did not know that the bomb would end the war. How do you have proof that it was? And did you ever have diplomatic means of trying to enforce Japan's surrender?
Objection. This is a compound question. Can you ask one and then the other?
This is a compound question, but the president is so intelligent that he can follow those 2 questions. Go ahead.
Please repeat the question, because it's compound.
We don't have enough time to keep trying to gain time, Mr. President.
Question, please.
Okay. Did you ever try? How do you have evidence that the bomb would stop the war?
It did.
Where's the evidence?
What evidence? It did.
How do you know that more lives couldn't have been saved? You keep saying that always we saved American lives. We wanted to end the war so no one else was killed. But you never say that you didn't want... May I please finish my question?
As President in Chief and Commander, it is my duty and obligation to protect American lives. And yet, I did what the Japanese government could not do. I tried to protect Japanese lives through leaflets and through the Potsdam Declaration. And you're accusing me?
Yes. What do you think I'm doing?
I tried to save their lives.
You have 40 more seconds for your cross-examination.
Okay. Did you ever have diplomatic means to try to gain Japan's surrender? Did you just want to drop the bomb?
We had diplomatic means. The Potsdam Declaration. We clearly stated that they should have surrendered, and yet...
That was the one and only. Why didn't you try more?
Try more? We were completely ignored. 10 days, I think, is more than enough to send a telegram informing us.
Okay, you know
their
what?
willingness.
You dropped the bomb only 10 days after the testing had been stopped. Are you listening? Excuse me. Okay. You dropped the bomb only 10 days after testing had stopped. What was the hurry? Why did you want to drop it so fast? Why didn't you wait a little longer? Was it because you really wanted to prevent, more lives from being killed, or because you wanted to checkmate the Red Army?
Answer the question, please.
Momentum was rising for a U.S. invasion, which was what we were trying to avoid. We didn't want to invade Japan. It would have cost thousands upon thousands, and as I said before, millions of U.S. lives.
Yet you did invade.
Final questions, please.
Okay, so did you know that civilians would be killed by using the bombs?
Yes.
Okay, and also, can we have evidence 5? Can you read this for me, Mr. President?
The world will note that the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, a military base. That was because we wished in this first attack to avoid, insofar as possible, the killing of civilians. But that attack is only a warning of things to come. If Japan does not surrender, bombs will have to be dropped on her war industries, and unfortunately thousands of civilian lives will be lost. I urge Japanese civilians to leave industrial cities immediately and to save themselves from the destruction.
So, first of all, you call Hiroshima a military base, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, although many people were killed.
I just said, I urge Japanese civilians to leave the industrial cities.
On August, you just had this speech.
Order in the court, please.
You just had this speech on August 9th.
Yes, August 9th.
It was the day that the second bomb was dropped. Nagasaki. Yes. Okay. So, which means that already hundreds of thousands of civilians were killed already.
As I said
Hiroshima.
before, we had warned them prior to the bombs through leaflets and through the Potsdam Declaration.
That's not my question. My question is, if you stated here that you will have to be dropped and many civilians will be killed.
Excuse me.
You said that many civilians will be killed, although on August 6th, many civilians will be killed. You're talking about your future
on
plans
August 9th,
here.
I said that many civilians would have been killed because Japan had not issued in the surrender yet.
You're saying that thousands of civilian lives will be lost.
Will be lost if Japan
This
didn't
is on August
surrender.
9th. It's on August
I
9th.
think your point has been made. Your last few questions,
Okay.
please.
I'd like to say, you thought that dropping the leaflets was something good, for the first bomb, correct?
Yes.
Yet you did not allow a decent interval between the two bombs. Correct?
Objection, 5 days is more than enough.
5 days is more than enough.
5 days, when
Your
the first.
final two questions.
Okay. How do you evacuate so many cities how do you evacuate so many cities in only such few days? And why was one bomb not enough?
Because they didn't surrender after the first bomb. Is that not right? They were completely isolated from the world. They did not show any signs that they were going to surrender. And Mr. David Johansson might have said they went through Portugal once and through Sweden twice, but through the US, none.
Yeah, okay, but still,
Okay, order in the court.
Going
Bring it up in your
through.
closing statements. Thank you, Mr. President. You may be seated. Order in the court.
They didn't surrender from Sweden.
At this time, we will hear the closing speeches from each side, beginning first with the prosecution and then with the defense. You have 5 minutes total to deliver your final closing arguments. Quiet in the audience, please. Jury.
Ladies and gentlemen, Judge Nelson, honorable members of the jury. Today we have heard a lot of arguments for and against Truman's decision to drop the bomb. But one thing that should be remembered and cannot be altered is unnecessary death of over 250,000 civilians. Women, children, and men who were killed without a chance to defend themselves. President Truman stands before us and applauds himself as the hero who ended the worst conflict in human history. The truth is that Truman ignored facts that his subordinates had given him. He only listened to the advice that he wanted to hear because of his stubbornness and selfishness. He went on instead to perform the largest mass murder in human history by a single individual. Mass murder. Truman's action can only be described by Article 6 in the Nuremberg trials, crimes against humanity. He committed murder against the civilian population, which is unacceptable in any situation. We have proven to you today that President Truman had ignored the real factors that led to the end of the war.
These three factors, if taken into consideration by Truman, could have saved 250,000 lives more. Firstly, he ignored his military advisors, who informed him that Japan's military forces were completely incapable of putting up resistance. They insisted to him that the Japanese were crumbled, as seen by desperate national suicides. He ignored that and was concentrated only to bring Japanese down to their knees. Secondly, he ignored the scientists' warning about the hidden costs of the atomic bomb, such as radiation. Finally, he stubbornly stood by an unconditional surrender, whereas a proper surrender would have ended the war several months earlier. His main motive to do so was take revenge for Pearl Harbor, which was a military base compared to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which were civilian targets. If he would just have accepted the terms that he would accept anyway in 1945, the war would have been over and countless lives more would have been saved, American and Japanese alike.
We have tackled the warnings. We have tackled the warning and leaflets argument of the defense. To evacuate 33 major cities in 5 days is an impossible task. And as to the radio messages, I would like to say that not all the Japanese owned radios, so there's no way they could get this information. The proper way to warn the Japanese would have been to make a clear message, not something vague like the Potsdam Declaration. For example, a demonstration of the power of the atomic bomb, like a bombing in Tokyo Bay, instead of sending very small and questionable propaganda leaflets. As to the casualty estimates, they are not fact, they are only estimates. There is no way that anyone can know for sure what the casualties would be. The thing we do know is that Hiroshima and Nagasaki were chosen because of their concentration of population, as stated in the Strategic and Bombing Survey. As to the President's comment on peace through Sweden, the way you try and accomplish peace is through a neutral country. They didn't try to surrender to Sweden. They tried to surrender to the United States through Sweden. You have a neutral third party, obviously, if anyone should know this.
We proved that the U.S. attempts for peace negotiations were not even close to those of Japanese. The U.S. knew that the Japanese were wanting to surrender by sending the memorandum to MacArthur and Roosevelt. Not only that, but though the interceptions like the magic of Japanese messages, they knew about surrender attempts. Finally, the 3 surrender attempts through neutral countries like Portugal and Sweden was not entertained by the U.S. Their president should be held accountable of such mistakes, and also the biggest one, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. From today, the only impression you can get is that Truman is guilty of crimes against humanity because he was selfish. He ignored all the warnings thrown against him by very experienced and knowledgeable men and only cared for what he believed.
Defense, your closing argument. Yes. Order in the court, please.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today the prosecution has tried to use President Truman as a scapegoat for everything that happened in the war. In total war, the kind that Japan engaged in, no one is exempt from attack or warfare. The Japanese used the Ketsugo strategy proposed by the Japanese government, where civilians were trained and acted as soldiers. There was no distinction between what a soldier could do and what a civilian could do aside from what weapons they may have. This was a new kind of enemy, one that would force its entire nation to die rather than surrender to defend, apparently so they could keep one man alive, their emperor. One that had no problems with annihilating other countries' soldiers if they weren't fighting against them, as we saw in Pearl Harbor. In addition to that, although the prosecution claims about how the Japanese were ready to surrender, there were no official meetings or even a telegram saying, we'd like to talk about the Potsdam, There was nothing like that. If the Japanese were really intent on surrendering, they would have at least asked something, and they didn't. For using the atomic bomb and ending this horrible war, instead of launching a full-scale invasion and risking thousands, maybe even millions of lives, Truman is a savior for the American people, for the Allied powers, and for world peace.
In closing, President Harry S. Truman is a hero, and we find it completely unnecessary and ridiculous that this great man, the savior of the United States, and dare I say the world itself, is on trial for stopping the greatest war this planet we call home has ever witnessed. Indeed, the bombs were necessary, for President Truman knew the other weapons in the hands of the Japanese, such as biological warfare, spreading germs throughout the nations they were against. With 2 biological warfare units, 731 and 100 in Manchuria, this kind of warfare was a real threat. Studies in these units were disgustingly used upon human subjects as if they were some kind of lab rats, which involved burning, freezing, high pressure, and bullets. Of the 6,000 subjects, there were virtually no survivors, 0 survivors. In addition, this research went outside the laboratories and into action on the battlefield. By infecting the Chinese population, 440,000 people perished. This is double the deaths caused by the atomic bombs. Now I ask you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, which is worse, this sick warfare or the 2 bombs used to stop all this? In addition, the Japanese were thoroughly warned, beginning with the Potsdam Declaration and following it, 5 million leaflets in 5 days before the bomb in Hiroshima was dropped, and then again another 5 million leaflets, another 5 days before the bomb on Nagasaki was dropped. Lastly, taking into consideration the estimates Admiral Leahy, one of the prosecution witnesses, gave to President Truman, pointed out that millions of American men would die and that up to 40% of the American army would be destroyed. For all these reasons, Truman is our savior, and finally, the end justifies the means.
The jury will be released in the back for deliberation and for a vote. We ask everyone to please stay seated. Everyone, please stay seated. The jury members will deliberate, and under the protocols for deliberation, they will take the 2 or 3 minutes they have, and then finally vote. They will vote in a silent ballot, so we will see how, to what extent they were convinced by each side. I would like to congratulate both sides, all the witnesses. It's a very long day in here. Today you witnessed, these are real arguments, and anything that the witnesses use the information must be based on primary sources, on actual evidence that exists prior to the invention of Wikipedia. And the internet, yeah. These are also, you have to remember that these are real arguments. These were real decisions put upon world leaders in extremely stressful and under extremely stressful circumstances. I think you guys can definitely commend the lawyers. You have no idea how much work they put in, and they've been on the stage now for 5 hours. Especially, I think, the extent how difficult it is to create the cross-examination. When you're sitting down there and listening, it seems quite easy because the connections come quite quickly. But when you're up here and you have to think on the spot and figure out how to attack the witness, it's very difficult. So commend all of you for that. We are going to wait for 2 minutes, and then we will get the result. And Harry Truman we will decide if he's going to Mykonos. We will see. Alcatraz or Mykonos, that's what we've been saying.
We're the tiebreaker this year. I still want to vote.
are waiting. They are tallying their opinions. They have been discussing various arguments, and now they are taking a silent ballot. Okay, in real life, the jury would go on and on and on to try to come to a complete consensus, but of course we don't have time for that, so they will take a vote. We won, right? Has the jury come to a decision? Mr. Popovac is delivering the message from the jury. Mr. Truman, will you please stand? Mr. Truman has been charged with crimes against humanity. How has the jury ruled?
The decision is a 7-3 decision, and they have found President Truman guilty. Hold on.
Order, please.
Hold on. Hopefully we don't get wrapped up in the winning and look at the bigger discussion here. It's been my order in
the court.
Hopefully we could look at this in a different context and not get caught up in the competition and the winning and look at the bigger discussion we've had here today. All right. But some of the reasons from the jury backstage, we deliberated for only a couple minutes, and one of the major decisions was this opportunity to go through Sweden or Portugal as a mediator to negotiate a peace. And that was something that could have been used. That was a viable option. Another one, too, was there were these overtures of surrender back in January that were talked about. Those were also brought up. And then also Stimson sent a memorandum to President Truman July 2nd, 1945, saying that they were so weakened that they were about to fall eventually. So these were three major reasons that the jury brought up backstage in the deliberation. All right? Thank you.
Thank you. All the witnesses come up on stage. We're going to do a picture. We're going to take one picture. All witnesses come up stage.